The MLB draft is done. The Dodgers took 14 pitchers plus 7 other guys who aren't pitchers. We're going to dig into all of it with Justin from Future Dodgers. So let's talk about it now on All Dodgers. Hey Dodger fans, this is Jeff Snider. This is the All Dodgers podcast. I am Jeff. I am your friend. I am by myself, but just for a second. Clint and Kevin are not with me, but Justin from Future Dodgers is with me. In fact, let me prove that by pushing this button. There is Justin from Future Dodgers. Remember, All Dodgers is part of the Believe network of podcasts, brought to you by Bet Online, which I'll tell you more about in a few minutes. But today we are talking, the All-Star game is today. We're all getting ready to watch the All-Star game tonight or to ignore the All-Star game, however we may roll. But before that, as part of the All-Star weekend festivities, the Major League Baseball held their draft. The draft used to be held in early June, and then a few years ago they moved it to July to do it in conjunction with the All-Star break. And so the Dodgers had 21 picks in the 20 rounds. They took 14 pitchers, 4 outfielders, 2 catchers, and a shortstop. And we are going to talk about at least a lot of those 21 names here with my buddy Justin from Future Dodgers. Justin, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
We've talked before. I used to be on that other podcast. Now I'm here, and you are a friend of every podcast because you know your Dodgers prospects. You know the draft. For me, I pay attention to the names coming in, and the vast majority of the names I've never heard before, especially after the first couple rounds. You being much more in tune with it than me, aren't necessarily in that same boat. You've heard a lot more of the names. So I guess, this was a very pitcher-heavy draft. The Dodgers, like I said, they took 14 pitchers. Not their most pitcher-heavy draft. That was probably 2021 when of their 20 picks, I think 18 of them were pitchers. And of the 18 guys they signed, 17 of them were pitchers. And that's turned out to be a pretty fruitful draft for the Dodgers. They got Emmett Sheehan and Justin Robleski were both in that draft. Ben Kasparius was in that draft. So, that's 3 big leaguers. I think, who was the other one who's made, Jordan Leisure has made the
Nick
big
Nastrini, also a big leader.
Nick Nastrini did make the big, and now back in the Dodgers organization. I think Nastrini and Leisure, were they both in the same White Sox trade?
They were, yeah.
So Leisure is not back with the Dodgers, but Nastrini is back in the organization. And then there's, Maddox Bruns and Peter Hubuck, who both still have some promise. We're not here to talk about the 2021 draft, other than to say this one felt a lot like that, with the Dodgers taking a lot of pitchers.
Yeah, well, I do think the difference is that class had 2 hitters overall, and both of them were late on, what was then day 3, what would now be day 2 of the draft. Somehow both of them are now in the organization because the one that they didn't sign was Mike Sirota, who went to school, was drafted by the Reds, and then traded to the Dodgers. All turned out okay. He's like a near consensus top 100 guy after the first half he's had. But this draft, you look at the first 8 picks, and it's split 4-4 between hitters and pitchers. I think they typically tend to, at least on the used to be day 3, we'll just call it the back half of the draft, it's around 11 to 20. They favor pitchers. At that point, you're talking about guys with, you call them flaws, call them things that they need to develop. And you can just make the case for certain pitchers, all right, well, if he gets this tweak or if we can tweak this, there's just a lot more of a chance of some guy popping up as a pitcher. Whereas the hitters, some guys just don't have power, don't have the frame or the body to develop, 20 home run power. And that's just always going to be, a hole in their game. Pitchers feels like there's a little bit more volatility, especially the last 5 or 10 years with the state of modern development. Guys can add 3 or 4 miles an hour velocity, even coming out of college, not just high school arms. So it feels like, they too tend to go a little more pitcher heavy in the back half of the draft, but front half split pretty evenly.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I've got a theory that I haven't totally worked out, but I think that hitters, you have to be born with something to turn into a good major league hitter. I think pitchers, you can you can make yourself into a good pitcher with hard work. I think there's just certain people who, no matter how good you are in high school, you're just never going to be a big league hitter because you don't have whatever you have to be born with to do that. And I don't know how teams figure out who has that, and maybe teams don't know that either.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I certainly didn't have it as a hitter. I can tell you that much.
I know that. That's why I was a pitcher. I'm, hey, I can do this, and I can control everything. I mean, let's start at the top because obviously your first pick is always the most exciting. In this case, it was kind of weird. The Dodgers had two picks in a row, and so basically they're interchangeable. Picks 40 and 41, they could have called the names in a different order, and so we'll talk about both of them. And they both happen to come from the same college. Left-handed pitcher Zack Root, and outfielder Charles Davalon, and both from Arkansas. Unfortunately, probably most fans have seen Charles Davalon in action because he had a very unfortunate highlight during the College World Series in their game against LSU when the line drive to left field that I think should have ended the game, and instead it bounced off of him, and LSU tied the game and went on to win the game. Rough time for Charles Davalon to become a bit of a household name, but you know what? Getting picked in the first round is probably a decent way to make up for that. So what are your thoughts on the two Arkansas bros coming to the Dodgers?
So I think they're both different from the types of pitchers and the types of hitters that the Dodgers have typically taken at the top of the draft. Uh, we'll start with Root. The pitchers that they have typically taken at the top of the draft, you look at the last 5 or 6 years, and I think this is true both high school and college. You're talking about guys with the fastball, premium velocity, and or bat missing traits, guys who can get swings and misses in the zone with their fastball. And Root, kind of like low to mid 90s. I think he was 91 to 94 ish in college. Can touch mid to upper 90s, but sat in that kind of 91 to 94 range, average around 93. And it's a sinker shape. And so he did not get a lot of swings and misses with his fastball. What he does have is 3 secondaries that can get a swing and miss. Changeup, really good. Curveball, really good. He also has a slider. And it's kind of more of a throwback style pitcher. And I say that there's still plenty of guys like Zack Root who exist. But I think a guy like Root in the draft 15 or 20 years ago goes a lot higher than 40 because he looks like a guy who's going to remain in the rotation and getting swings and misses with your fastball in the zone wasn't a trait that was valued as highly as it is now. And so I think it's very interesting because it's not the type of pitcher profile that the Dodgers have usually gone toward. It's an outlier pick, at least for them. And so for me, that piques my interest in terms of they definitely see something here. Is it a velo bump? Is it, they're going to add a 4-seam shape to the sinker and he's going to throw both? Or maybe it's just a really good sinker. And, even if that doesn't get swings and misses in the zone, the other 3 secondaries are so good, it'll work. It'll all work out. I'm interested to see his development because he's not like a lot of these other pitchers that they've drafted, at least in recent years.
It's also interesting because we found out after the draft that he is a Clayton Kershaw fan, grew up kind of emulating Clayton Kershaw, and maybe he emulated him a little bit too much without a dominant fastball. He emulated late years Clayton Kershaw. But yeah, like you said, it'll be interesting to see if the Dodgers do think there's more in that fastball, or if it's just, this guy is polished. He's a college guy. He's ready to be a starter in the big leagues pretty soon, and going with that higher floor rather than pushing for ceiling with this pick. Before we get to Davalon, let me just jump in real quick, talk a little bit about Bet Online, our sponsor. Bet Online continues to be the number one source for all your sports betting action. With baseball in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting from MLB, UFC to tennis and NFL futures. BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. And in between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. Head to the website today and take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the outfielder from Arkansas, Charles Davalon.
Yeah, I had him as one of my targets for the Dodgers' second round pick, though he probably doesn't get there. Uh, he also is a little bit different than I think, at least the college bats that they've taken. And you compare him to the prep bats they've taken the last 2 years, guys, premium speed, top of the line, 80 grade speed, hit over power. The college bats they've taken high up, the last 5 or 6 years, Dalton Rushing, Cody Hosey, Michael Bush, all guys with premium power or at least above average. Uh, Davalon has hit over power, but that's not because it's no power. It's because the hit tool is just that good. The back to ball skills and the approach are some of the best in the draft. More walks than strikeouts this year. Uh, just a guy who is going to be a tough out offensively. Hit 14 home runs. The power, I think it's like approximately average grade. Uh, but what you're really buying here are the bat to ball skills and the approach. That's what's going to make him a fun player to watch offensively. Defensively, he's played left field. He's played a little bit of center field. He's played second base in the past. It wouldn't be surprising to see them move him around between those three positions. A guy who can add a lot of value with his offensive projection, playing those three positions. You think back to like 2017, 2018, the kind of value that Chris Taylor and Kike Hernandez were bringing back when those guys were in their primes for the Dodgers. You can think about him maybe if he reaches, 90th percentile version of what he could be, providing similar value.
Interesting. Yeah, that's they did announce him as an outfielder, but obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that's their full plan for him. Kind of interestingly, there was another guy they announced as a catcher who has played almost entirely outfield in college. That was way down at the 19th pick, Anson Arose. Without, we're not just going to go in order through these, but when we get to the Dodgers' third pick, their second round pick, it does kind of jump to what you might call a classic Dodgers move, which is taking a guy with a big arm who has been hurt. Obviously, I think the most famous draft example of that would be Walker Buehler, who the Dodgers drafted knowing he needs Tommy John surgery right at this moment, and they were just patient, and Walker Buehler ended up working out okay for the Dodgers. Cam Leiter, the part of the Leiter family, apparently the son of the lesser Leiter brother, not Al or Mark's son, but the third brother. I assume he has a name too. I don't know it, but Cam Leiter. So he is the nephew of big leaguers Al and Mark Leiter, the cousin of big leaguers Jack and Mark Jr. But he didn't pitch a ton in college recently because of injury. And what do you see from him? Do you think this is one of those where if Leiter had been healthy, he would have gone higher?
There's definitely a chance. This is much more of like a traditional Dodgers pitcher pick, where it's premium stuff, mid 90s fastball into the upper 90s. There's a plus curveball there, and had shoulder surgery and didn't pitch at all this year. It sounds a lot like the guy the Dodgers usually go after, which is why it's surprising, at least for me, to see them take a guy like Root, because Leiter feels very familiar. Root doesn't feel like the typical Dodgers pitcher. Now, of course, Root could work out tremendously and Leiter could not. That is fully within the range of outcomes here. But yeah, if he were healthy, I think there's a very good shot he goes earlier. And I think that's why, at least it seems like from my read of how the draft played out, he might get an overslot bonus in the second round, because he could go back to school. I think he's already been throwing bullpens. And so he could go back to school and potentially go even higher. Now, he wouldn't have a whole lot of leverage next year, but I would be willing to bet more likely than not he gets an overslot bonus.
And we did see the Dodgers have already signed two of their draft picks, both well below slot value, the 9th and 10th rounders, Connor O'Neill and Jacob Frost, both of whom were college seniors. And so, like you said, the situation where they didn't have leverage. And so, that kind of 9th and 10th rounders, kind of when you take those guys, it's let's take a college senior who we can probably sign for peanuts or something similar to peanuts, which, it's crazy to see Connor O'Neill sign for $2,500, which is, basically, here's a plane ticket, just get here, and Jacob Frost, not a ton more than that. Do you see other guys in this draft besides Leiter who might the Dodgers might be eyeing some of that, the money they're saving on these underslot guys to try to get these other guys signed?
Yeah, so Aiden West, their fourth round pick, and Mason Ladenza, their sixth round pick, both high school hitters. West is a shortstop from Maryland. He's committed to NC State. Ladenza is an outfielder from Pennsylvania, committed to Pittsburgh. I would expect both of those guys that did overslot picks. They were both linked to the Dodgers pre-draft. I'm pretty sure by ESPN and Kylie McDaniel. West offensive, a little bit of an offensive focused infielder. Ladenza, big 6'5" guy with power projection. Um, both exciting guys. I think, not in like the top tier of prep hitters, but this is a really good prep hitter class, and I got a couple of them here. No prep pitchers at least before round 20 is when they took their first prep pitcher, but there's a signability question there, so they could walk out with these two as their only two high school players.
And back to the lighter question of an injured pitcher. We have a couple other guys the Dodgers took who haven't pitched a lot in college for injury or other reasons. I guess injuries involved with both. Jack O'Connor's one of those, right? Am I remembering that right?
He is. I think he just had like UCL brace surgery is what I saw. So
Yeah.
another like typical Dodgers fit taking a guy who's currently injured.
And then Sam Horn is really interesting one. They took a lot later in the draft in the 17th round. He's another guy who has had some injuries in college, but even more notably is a college football player and battling to be Missouri's starting quarterback this fall. But seems like maybe he is interested in playing pro ball while also trying to be a college quarterback.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I think I saw Jim Callis tweet that, maybe they can come to an agreement with him where he can go play football in the fall, but he still signs his contract. Uh, it's similar, most notably happened with Kyler Murray. Uh, I'm not sure I see Sam Horn winning the Heisman. His odds are probably a little lower. As you said, he's battling for the starting quarterback job. I know they have a transfer from Penn State at Missouri who's also battling for that quarterback job. It's not even a guarantee that he would start, but purely on value, the public boards had him inside the top 150 or 200, at least from what I saw. And so getting a guy like that in the 17th round, I assume he'd have to be over slot because on talent, he's a guy who could go back to school and go in the top 5 rounds next year. But if they're able to get him signed, even if it's for an overslot deal, would a great get. Probably value wise, the best pick in the back half of their draft class.
Huh. That's really really interesting. That's yeah. I read somewhere. I don't remember where I read it, but that Horn was a guy who, if he hadn't been committed to playing college football, he might have been drafted in the first few rounds out of high school with the talent that he had. And then I believe it was Tommy John surgery that he had early in his college career. So between that and the football, just hasn't thrown a lot of innings in college baseball. Trying to figure out where to go next. One guy who's really intriguing. It's kind of funny how people get excited anytime any baseball player shows any amount of intelligence. They're like, "Wow, this guy's an athlete and he's smart." And sometimes it's to the extreme. You'll be like, "This guy reads War and Peace on the airplane." It's like, okay, so he knows how to read. Like I read War and Peace in high school. But in this case, in the case of the Dodgers' seventh round pick, we're not talking about just a dude who reads a book on the airplane. We're talking about a literal MIT, scored a 36 on the ACT, majoring in some ridiculous thing that you can only major in at MIT. Mason Estrada, like legit, not just smart for a baseball player. Like he's smarter than you or me or anybody watching this right now. And also, he's a seventh round pick of the Dodgers. What do you think about that guy?
I think it's engineering. And there might be a more specific facet of engineering that he's majoring in, but pretty sure some kind of
Some sort
engineering.
of engineering, yeah.
Yeah, unsurprising. Um, yeah, obviously an interesting pick. I'd seen some of the buzz around him. He was at the MLB Draft Combine, and he's it's not a some people might not know that MIT even has a baseball team, but it's not a gimmick. He's actually committed to transfer to Tennessee. So if the Dodgers aren't able to sign him, he'll be at Tennessee next year instead of MIT. And he's got a mid-90s fastball with an interesting slider. Uh, could be a guy who, if he were going to relieve, you could see him moving quickly. I think he's starting in college, and he'll probably. I'm pretty sure he's starting in college. I want to double check that, but uh, yeah, interesting pitch, and not just purely on the name value of MIT.
Aerospace engineering. So, he's
Yeah,
not just going to engineer. He's going to send people to the moon or, or something. I don't even know. But that one's really interesting. There's a couple guys who jumped out at me, and I'm trying to remember which names, and I'm hoping that you will remember which names. As I was reading through the guys, there's a couple guys. I know Jacob Frost was one of them who they signed out of Kansas State. There's at least one or two more who you look at their college stats and you're like, how did this guy get drafted? Like, we're talking guys with ERAs in the fives in college. Uh, whether Jacob Frost or I don't know if you know of the one or two others that I'm thinking of. What is it that they see in guys like this? Is it just stuff that they think we can fix that?
so I think another one with like a decently high either ERA was maybe Logan Lunsford, was their 12th rounder out of Wake Forest, and yeah, I think a lot of it is stuff. I mean, you can think about in past years, Eric Swan, who was a fourth round pick out of Middle Tennessee State, had an ERA of like six something at Middle Tennessee State. Obviously that not the SEC. Uh, Now he's one of the, at least in my opinion, one of the top pitchers in the organization, one of the top pitching prospects in the organization. Uh, Everyone knew in the draft, this is a guy who has great stuff, fastball into the triple digits. Uh, and some of these guys, it's just harnessing it. Some of it is just more innings, more development, like you have covered. Some of these guys just don't have the college innings to further develop, and you need game reps. So I think with pitchers, teams are, and this is true, in the major leagues too. Teams are a lot more willing to forgive an ERA that looks a little ugly than they are a triple slash line that looks pretty ugly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it was Lunsford I was thinking of, a 5.25 ERA in college this year. And even a guy taken right before him, Dylan Tate, uh, had a 3.90 ERA, which, obviously ERAs are a crazy thing. College leagues vary so much, but with Dylan Tate, what you see is, he throws 99. He's probably gonna, they probably have him slated for relief and just gonna come out pumping gas out of the bullpen. And if they can refine the stuff a little bit and get him to the point where that 3.90 ERA in college could turn into something much better. I mean, you look at so many guys like you were mentioning, even Ben Casparius. His college numbers were nothing to write home about, and then they said, we've got something planned for this guy.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember too, like development isn't linear. It takes time. Casparius wasn't a guy who was immediately a top prospect. Even when he graduated from prospect status, he wasn't a guy who was a top prospect. But he's made a huge major league impact this year. If he was still a prospect, he would definitely be, one of, if not the top pitching prospect in the organization because of what he's shown at the major league level. Same
Yeah,
thing with a guy like Justin Robleski, who has continued to develop even after graduating from prospect status.
yeah, absolutely. Um, let's go back. There's a couple of the higher picks that we haven't talked about yet. Third round, Landen Vidoric. Am I saying that right?
I
Probably
wouldn't know.
close enough.
Sounds right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've just decided that's right. So, out of Cincinnati, looks like a guy who crazy fast and hits the ball hard. Like when you've got 39 stolen bases out of 40 attempts and 115-mile-an-hour exit velocity, that's some tools that will that get any scout drooling.
Yeah, and I saw some people, at least online or in my mentions, were a little curious about the pick. He was not ranked. I think the third round pick was 104 overall. He was not ranked in that range by the public boards. He was a guy who was ranked, I think in like the 300 or 400s, at least from what I saw. Uh, but I also saw like the week of the draft this past week. I think it was Baseball America, somewhere else. I think it's like three different publications talking about him as a potential sleeper. And this close to the draft, potential sleeper is code for, yeah, he's ranked down here, but there are teams that like him and he's going to go way above where he's ranked. Uh, and so it wasn't surprising to see him taken that highly. I had him as a target for the back half of the draft. Clearly, he would not have gotten there because of the Dodgers are willing to take him in the third round. Obviously, other teams liked him third, fourth, or fifth round as well. I would assume that he ends up being an underslot pick just because of the comparison between where some people had him and where he ended up going. But this is a guy who, in a couple years might look totally fine as a third round pick. Now, the idea that it could be a reach, and I say reach, quote unquote, because we really have no idea. But the concept that it would be a reach in like 2 or 3 years could end up looking silly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was going to ask. Is this a situation where teams will be in contact with a guy before the draft, say, hey, look, we like you a lot. You're probably looking at fifth or sixth round. We're going to take you in the third round, but just know that our plan is to try to sign you for sixth round money. Is that something that you're on board with? Do they have those conversations beforehand, or is it just something they just kind of cross their fingers and hope?
Yeah, so teams are in contact with the representatives. Like, that's a lot of what happens at the top of the draft, where if you have situations potentially like this year, I think we'll see. Might need to wait a little bit to hear about some of the reporting, but in years like 2021 with Henry Davis, the Carlos Correa draft, or some notable drafts where, there might have been a different player ranked as maybe like more consensus top pick, uh, but they ended up going with those guys in part because of the bonus they were willing to take, and they wanted to spread out that money elsewhere. When you're first overall, you can have that conversation with anyone you want. If you're picking 40th, you can have that conversation with guys, but you ultimately don't know if they're going to get there or if those guys are having similar conversations with other teams around you. So
Yeah.
all that's to say, the short answer to your question is yes, but the long answer is it is it's a big game. It's more so just will you take this number, because that number can be taken to other teams, and some guys want the most money, some guys want the best development situation, some guys maybe they just really like a certain team and want to play for that team. It'll vary from player to player.
Yeah, absolutely. If I remember right, the year the Dodgers drafted Clayton Kershaw, they were helped out by, I think, the Pirates taking a less touted player because they were being cheap, and that's that bumped everything down, because then the Red Sox were, oh wait, Andrew Miller's available, and then the Tigers like, wait, so now whoever they took, and so then suddenly when it got to Dodgers, Clayton Kershaw was still available, which they didn't think he was going to be. So it's funny the ripples those decisions can have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think, I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, it's even more kind of stark in the if the example that you're retell. I trust your retelling of the story, but when there wasn't a bonus pool, if you weren't spending the recommended slot value on a pick, you didn't necessarily have to reinvest that. Maybe there wasn't the same kind of advantage. Whereas now you have the bonus pools all lined up, so if you save 500,000 or 1 million with your first pick, most likely you're going to be reinvesting that elsewhere into other picks instead of just taking that 1 million and pocketing it into the owner's pockets.
yeah. So the Rockies
Okay.
took Greg Reynolds with the second pick that year, and the Pirates took Brad Lincoln, and both of those were kind of surprising. And so that meant that the Tigers at 6, it was the Tigers who took Andrew Miller. That's why he got traded to the Red Sox later. The Tigers took Andrew Miller, and the Tigers had planned on taking Clayton Kershaw because they didn't think Andrew Miller was going to be available. But once Miller was available, they took him, and so the Dodgers got stuck with Clayton Kershaw, and could have had Andrew Miller, or but it seems like things worked out for them with the Clayton Kershaw pick. One other guy is Davian Hickson. It was their Dodgers 5th round pick. He had an interesting college career in that he was a closer at Rice one year, and then he was their top starter the next year, and was looking to transfer. I think he's committed to transfer to, what is it, Mississippi State right now.
Yeah. Hmm.
What is it? What do the Dodgers see in him? Do you think he's a a sign guy? Like they're for sure going to sign him because he's another guy who, when you look at the rankings, he was maybe picked higher than a lot of people might have expected.
Yeah, so he might be another guy who goes a little under slot, but yeah, reliever turned starter. So I think there's still some meat on the bone in terms of his development. Uh, just not as much experience starting at a high level. Probably would have gotten that at Mississippi State, or could get that if he doesn't sign. For what it's worth, I would expect all the guys in the top 10 rounds to sign. Uh, you know, barring any surprises, I would expect all of them to sign. Guys, in the back half of the draft, rounds 11 through 20, there's some more questionable ones there. But yeah, Hitson, low to mid 90s fastball, solid traits. Uh, would be interested to see if he can add some velo. If he does, that fastball could be plus. And reliever or starter, I think, interesting name, and got to watch in the next coming years.
Yeah, he's a guy. What I'm seeing is that Hickson sits at 93, but is topped out at 97. And so you wonder if teams are like, well, we know how to unlock that 97, get that to be where he's sitting. And, because if you can touch 97, there's a decent chance that with the right team working with you, you can turn that 97 into a 99 and turn your 93 into a 95 or 96.
Yeah, and I think he has the frame for it too. I think there's the potential for more velocity there, um, and I think with the existing fastball traits that he has, uh, we talked about getting swings and misses with your fastball in the zone. He's a guy who could absolutely have that with the premium velocity if he ends up growing into that.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a handful of names we haven't even said yet. Is there anybody, either guys we've talked about already or guys that we haven't talked about who, uh, you, like you said, you had guys on your list of guys who you wouldn't mind the Dodgers targeting at some point in the draft, whether it's those guys or just guys who you look at their stuff, their tools, whatever, and you think Dodgers got a really good value here. Like, who do you think in 5 years we're going to be looking back at this draft and say, oh yeah, that was the Robbie Porso draft, whatever. Like, any names like that jump out at you as a chance to be the guy from this draft?
I would actually say no, and I think the positive thing or the cool thing about this draft is that it's kind of spread out where I could look at the first 7 or 8 names, and any one of those guys, I can see the path to them being a major leaguer. And that is something the Dodgers do tend to do versus the we're going to go all in on a couple guys at the top of the draft, whether it's, you know, a college guy who's falling or a couple premium high school players. We're going to go all in to 2 or 3 guys and hope they work out because they got big upside, and kind of not disregard entirely, but we're going to maneuver the rest of the draft to sign those 2, 3, 4 guys. Uh, they really spread it out here, which is what they tend to do. They like to go under slot and then spread out that money later because you get more bites of the apple. When you have an organization that is good at developing players, the more talented players you can bring in, the more guys who can develop into top 100 prospects, major league contributors, and what have you. So I don't think there's a particular guy here that stands out. Obviously, you have the first 2 picks, Root and Davalon, who are headlining the class, but I think Cam Leiter, guy who has arguably first round talent. West and Ladenza, not necessarily like the top level of prep hitter this year, but it was a really deep prep hitter class, and they get 2 of these guys early on day 2. Uh, it's a fun class. And so there's no one that like stands out as like, yeah, this guy's a top 10 prospect in the organization right now. But looking at this, you've probably got 5 or 6 guys who slot into like the top 50 or 60.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And And then as that development happens, then you see what they turn into. And, some of them will turn into, Will Smith was a glove first catcher when the Dodgers drafted him, and now he's the only guy on the National League All-Star team who's batting 300. The development can happen, and sometimes it happens in the form of Michael Bush, who they developed and then turned him into Zaire Hope and Jackson Ferris. Sometimes it's in the form of Gavin Lux, who turned out to be, I wouldn't call him a bust in the big leagues, but didn't live up to his potential as a big leaguer that you would have expected based on his minor league stats. But then they turned him into Mike Sirota and now Charles Davalon, in that trade. So, a lot of this, when I saw something on Twitter, somebody asking, like, what position should the Dodgers target in the draft? And I'm like, well, you shouldn't target a position in the draft. This isn't the NBA. This isn't the NFL. You don't say, oh, our quarterback is retiring or getting older, let's draft a quarterback. No, you draft the players you think you can get the most value from, and some of that value ends up coming as trade value.
Yeah, I always find it interesting to see every draft. There are complaints, teams, fans will say, well, why did we draft a shortstop? We have a shortstop. In reality, half of the guys who are going to draft are shortstop, maybe not half, but a lot of these guys are shortstops. They play more premium positions, and then eventually, as they move up the minor league ladder, they move down the defensive positional pyramid, because what's required to be a shortstop at the major league level is a lot more than it is at college or high school or whatever. And also, guys grow into their bodies, they get bigger, get a little slower. Sometimes that manifests in more power at the plate, but less defensive value. So, yes, I will concur with you in that there really isn't a need to target a particular position. You might have, in some cases, just an extreme organizational weakness that you might want to target. For example, a couple years ago, this is probably still true, but a couple years ago, the Angels had like no pitching. They really needed to go after like a pitcher who can move quickly. They drafted Reed Detmers. I'm thinking of the 2020 draft out of Louisville. And he's been, I think, up and down a little bit in the majors, but moved quickly as a major league starter. So there are times when you might have such a severe organizational need for pitching or for offensive prospects, or you have an organizational strength. This is something that we develop really well. You can think about the Mariners and college pitching with Logan Gilbert and George Kirby. Guess who's sitting there at the third overall pick for them? It's Kate Anderson from LSU, who a lot of people thought should go number one. And so, sure, maybe it's like, well, we have a lot of pitching. Should we really take another college pitcher? But there's also the argument of this is a strength. This is something that we develop well. Let's do it. And then, if we really have such an overflowing surplus of pitching, trades are allowed.
Trade it for what you need. Yeah. Yeah. I was joking with a Mariners fan friend of mine after that pick. I said, oh, finally the Mariners get some pitching. That's exactly what they needed. But yeah, it's who knows? And we saw, obviously the Reed Detmers pick propelled the Angels to long-term success in the big leagues. That's definitely paid off for them in World Series titles and even division titles.
I don't think it's smart to draft for positional need, even in extreme cases, but it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, because worst case scenario, you draft the best player and then trade him for your needs. If that's the case, you're going to get more than just taking a lesser player. It's this really interesting draft that the Dodgers just had, because there's so many names that fit so many different boxes. Some of them are just that's a classic Dodgers pick. That doesn't feel like a Dodgers pick at all. All in all, like every draft, we won't really be able to tell what this really meant until a long time down the road. You mentioned Carlos Correa, and I remember a well-known draft analyst who I won't name. I remember reading him writing about, and I won't name just because I'm not really calling him out, because it was kind of the consensus at the time was that draft was a very weak draft class when Carlos Correa went first overall. But now you look at the guys who were taken in that draft: Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton, Kevin Gausman, Max Fried, Lucas Giolito, Corey Seager, you might have heard of him, Michael Wacha, Marcus Stroman, Like, this is just the first round. Like, there's a lot of guys who turned into pretty decent big leaguers, and then you get down farther. Like, it ended up being a pretty solid draft class. You just couldn't tell it at the time, and this is the case. These 21 guys the Dodgers took, we might end up with 21 big leaguers. We might end up with 0 big leaguers, and it could be any number in between, because it's just impossible to tell, especially when you're taking 14 pitchers, and we all know that pitchers, what's the old saying? There's no such thing as a pitching prospect, because injuries happen. Injuries happen a lot, and Dodger fans, we definitely know that. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens as time goes by. Anybody I should have asked you about that I didn't in this conversation, Justin?
I think we talked about a lot of names. I think we covered. We didn't cover everyone. I think we covered all the top guys, and then some of the interesting guys later on as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me for this. I know the All-Star game gets kicked off here in just a few minutes, so we'll wrap this up. But I always enjoy talking prospects with you and talking the draft. I don't know, like I said, I like to think I'm smart enough to know the things I'm not smart about, and definitely college and high school baseball players. Unless they're related to me, I don't pay attention to them very much. And then once the Dodgers draft, and then I start paying attention. But even the minor leagues, I'm not a prospect guy. I don't know it. So a guy with a name like Future Dodgers, that's what I'm looking for in my conversations about Future Dodgers. So thank you for being here with me. All of you watching, thank you for being here. Be sure to check out Justin over at Future Dodgers on Twitter. Like, literally, if you follow Justin, you will always be up to date on what you need to know about the draft, the minor leagues, anybody who can be classified as a future Dodger or a potential future Dodger. Justin's your go-to source for that. So Justin, thank you for that. I am going to wrap this up now. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Be sure to subscribe, ring the bell so you can get notified when we're going live. We'll have more content coming up for you tomorrow and the next day and the next day. That's just what we do. We keep talking Dodgers with you. Be sure to check out our Patreon, patreon.com/realfrg. With that, $5 a month, you can get access to our Discord server where we have a lot of fun talking Dodgers. We're doing watch-alongs together. We're doing members only live streams, occasional Dodger Stadium meetups. Be sure to check out all of that. Follow Justin on Twitter at Future Dodgers. Follow me at Snydog. You can follow Clint at RealFRG. Follow Kevin at Skinner7Kevin. Links are in the description. Be sure to like this, subscribe, all those things. And yeah, we will talk to you soon. Thanks again, Justin.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Talk to you later.